If you are ready to move from exhausted to extraordinary, this episode is for you. We go through in this episode learning how our limiting beliefs and the way that we approach stress, the way that we look at burnout, the way that we don't realize where we are on the burnout spectrum. If we can change just a little bit and learn that we have the power and control of our own thoughts, our own mind, our own decisions, then we can move from exhausted to extraordinary. Stay with us for this episode and learn more. Hi there, my name is Heather J. Kreider, and I welcome you to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast. I'm here to bring you real, practical, brain-based strategies helping you transform your life one thought at a time. Working hard and staying busy will only get you so far. To truly become happy, content, and who you're meant to be, you have to move beyond physical capacities and look from within, allowing you to overcome those obstacles and barriers. My mission is to help inspire you to take massive action to transform your life, all starting from the inside out. I invite you to watch or listen to this podcast and share it with others who you feel can also benefit from it. I invite you to join my free Facebook group, Beat Burnout. That's where we provide more practical neuroscience and mindset strategies, helping you reduce stress, anxiety, and overcome overwhelm. Thank you so much for being here. I'm honored and grateful for you.
You are stronger than you believe. You have greater powers than you know.
And today I am welcoming my colleague and someone who I so much admire everything that she's doing in the world. Clearly, you'll understand, because that's what we're going to talk about today: stress, burnout, and all the things related to that and how we can really improve. But Dr. Sharon Grossman, psychologist, success coach, and author of the international best-selling book, The 7E Solution to Burnout, Transforming High Achievers from Exhausted to Extraordinary. And I love that title. I think it's brilliant. For the past 19 years, Sharon has coached business owners who are struggling with anxiety, overwhelm, and burnout, and taking them through her Exhausted to Extraordinary method to break through all this mental fog, increase levels of energy, and enjoy more of what matters. And of course, that's why you're here today. And welcome to the Go Reflect Yourself podcast.
Thank you so much, Heather. And I just love your introduction. And as you were reading that, I'm thinking, wow, you should be doing, those audio books where you're reading the things out, because you have this soothing way of talking. And I could listen to you all day.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you. I'm happy to voice over your book if you want me to and put it in new audio.
I'll keep that in mind.
Oh my gosh. And it's so funny that you say that, because one of the things I was thinking while you were saying that is we're so critical of ourselves. I don't like listening to myself. We are our worst critic, and that also leads to self-sabotage and stress and burnout.
Absolutely. So I would say, if you think about how your mind works, it really responds most to images and words. And so when you have an image of, some catastrophe, or if you have a lot of self-talk that's very negative and critical, that's what your brain's responding to. And so if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety or a lot of depression and things like that, it's probably because you have that going on in the background. And you know what? So many of us actually have that on kind of like an autopilot, where we don't even realize that it's going on all the time. That only when we start to change our dialogue do we realize how it's so different. And so that's really part of the work that people have to do in order to transform their experience in the world, is really start to shift their relationship with themselves. And part of that is their self-talk.
That's huge. And thank you so much for saying that, because I think that's really Obviously, everything I talk about is reflection and coming from within, so that way we can have better experiences in the world. But it's scary. It's really scary for people to start peeling back those layers. And what are they going to find? And how do you deal with these things? And even to see them, it's a very difficult thing. But before we go down that rabbit hole too much, I do want to talk about why, and this is an obvious question, but I really want to hear from your perspective because you've dealt with this for so long. Why is burnout such a problem in our culture today?
Well, I don't think there's one reason for it. I think there's probably more than one. But I would say this, partly it's our culture where it's now expected for people to just work to the grind, And what we're seeing a lot in industries right now is that people are burning out and leaving. And what those companies are doing is they're taking the pool that's left over and they're making them do the work of 2 and 3 people, which obviously is a horrible idea because that is an absolute recipe for burnout. So that's a major contributor to the issue. I think the other main thing that I would say contributes to burnout is our own thinking, just like we were just talking about. And, you talk a lot about perception. And that's essentially what's happening is we have these ideas of things that are going on around us, and then we make some sort of meaning from that. We have interpretations, and those interpretations are the ones that are causing us all this grief. And so part of the work that I do is I help people really look at the way that their mind is coming to conclusions. And one of the things that I see really commonly is that people confuse what's real and what's not real. And what I mean by that is there's a difference between things that are happening that are facts. And then there are other things that are going through your mind that are actually like your thoughts about those facts. And people often think that if they have something in their mind, it is a fact. So they don't question it. And then they're responding to that and having all kinds of emotional distress. And so part of what I do when I'm working with them is help them to differentiate between those two things. And that alone is like the biggest aha moment that you can have sometimes is like, oh, I realized that all this stuff that was going through my mind was actually just my thoughts about it. And that's optional, right? Because it's totally subjective. And if I thought about it this way and it's not real, it's just kind of like one way that I could choose to look at it, then I can also choose to look at it this whole other way. And I often take people through this exercise where I ask them, okay, yeah, you've told me all the things that you really don't like about your job, but what do you really appreciate about it? What are the things that you do love? And then they'll start to list those things. And I'll say, what would be different if every day you went to work focusing just on those things that you appreciate? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, I would feel lighter. And that's the thing is our thoughts are really heavy. And so they are the ones creating a lot of the stress and the overwhelm and the frustration and ultimately the burnout. So there's so much work to be done on our mindset. And people don't often realize that because they're attributing their external circumstances to the problem. They're saying it's my industry, it's my job, it's my boss, it's the workload. It's all the things that are out there, which is very disempowering, Heather, because, hey, we don't have as much control over those things, right? But if we know the truth, which is that our mind is contributing so much to the problem, that's actually really good news because we can change our thinking and by default, change how we feel.
Yeah, but it's so much easier and much more fun and habitual just to complain, right? And obviously I'm making light of that, but that's the habit we get into, and we get, this impound of negativity that's constantly on us. So everything, and that's why I so appreciate having conversations with you, because you take different perspectives and say them in ways that really is a no-brainer at the end of the day. But it's the difficult part of each individual being willing to have that look in the mirror and say, you know what? I am showing up. I am complaining. And what if I had fact versus fiction, and I just changed that perception just a little bit.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like sometimes it's that we don't really know that we have a choice. So we really believe that it's those things out there that are causing us to feel this way. And it's sometimes that's why coaching comes in really handy, because we have somebody from outside that's able to look at our situation and say, like, have you considered this? And that gives us that aha moment. And so for those people, that's really helpful. Whereas other people may realize that, I do have a very negative way of thinking about things, or I am somebody who's really addicted to stress, or my mind tends to run really anxious. I just don't know what to do about it. And that's where we do coaching around like how to think differently, how to really unblock your mind and show you all the ways that you can challenge the thoughts that come up, whether it's automatic thoughts. There are certain patterns of thinking that are unhelpful, that are habitual. And also, like you mentioned that, we complain and we have all these things that we say that are negative. Our brain is just programmed to be that way, right? So it's our job, if we want to have a different kind of experience in the world, to do the work to change that programming and to say, brain, I understand what you're doing. I appreciate you trying to keep me safe and to be efficient. And here's what I want you to do instead. Like otherwise, it's running the show from a subconscious point of view. And we really need to take charge and say, like, this is what I want to go for. And so I am being really deliberate about the way that I think about things. And I kind of can reverse engineer, how do I want to feel? And then I can insert the thoughts that align with those feelings, right? So if you're feeling burned out and it's because you have all these negative thoughts about yourself, about your workplace, about what's possible, a lot of times people come to me and they're like, I think I might need to change careers, or this isn't working for me and it's never going to work. And I'll say to them, before you do anything, before you make any sort of massive life change, let's have a conversation about like what's actually going on behind the scenes. And if it's the kind of job where they're expecting you to work the amount that 3 people would do, yeah, probably anybody would burn out in that case. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a position where you see other people doing the same amount of work that you are doing and you're really burned out and they're not, there's probably something different that your brain is doing. So let's get you caught up with what's possible. And then from there, you make a decision about whether you want to continue doing this or not.
I love that. Thank you for explaining it that way and what is possible. That's a huge light bulb for people. And like you said, most people don't know we have a choice. You just get in that rat race and the grind. And some days it's just trying to get through the day as a victory, much less to take that breath to explore changing how you approach the day. And so let me ask you this. Especially, and I don't like saying this because the past year and a half, 2 years, yes, we've all been under extra stress, extra pressure. Everybody's been affected in one way or the other, but stress is not new. It's just we now have a different connection to it. So my question out of that for you is, when people are so burned out, their stress level so high, it's really difficult, extra difficult to take that step back, to take that breath, to be able to even begin to explore a different way of thinking or changing. It's just that in and of itself is too stressful. What do you say to that? And what approaches would you have to help people get through that mindset?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I would say this: burnout is something that happens on a spectrum. So if you're kind of at the end of your rope, then that is probably the hardest point to make a change, but it's not impossible. It just means that if you were closer to maybe the beginning or middle of that spectrum, you might be able to help yourself more. And like in my book, I created a workbook that goes along with it. So for people who want to do that work on themselves and you're kind of closer to the beginning of that spectrum, that's where you might be able to actually say, hey, let me fill out these questions and let me kind of take myself through all of these exercises and I can start to see how these concepts are sinking in and start to apply it. But yeah, when you're kind of too far gone, it's really hard to work on yourself. And that's where working with another person is really helpful, or even working in a group is really helpful because you have the social support. And one of the things that I've noticed when I do group work is that people, before they even start to see any sort of change, transformation as a result of doing the program, the first thing they always talk about is how amazing it is for them to be amongst like-minded people, to feel the support, and most of all, to stop feeling so lonely in their experience, because they start to hear other people talk about what they're going through. And they're like, oh, so I'm not the only one that's experiencing this. Because as you know, like, we're so ashamed of our experiences, and it's so like against our culture to be vulnerable and to share what we're actually going through. And so when you are in this safe environment where everybody's sharing and you feel like, oh, okay, we're all in this together, they all get what I'm going through, that is part of the healing journey.
That's huge. And thank you for saying that. It's absolutely huge. What are some resources that you would suggest to people? Obviously, your book is a great, great place to start, and it's full of resources. And like you said, there's the workbook that goes along with it to kind of help along the way. Are there in the moment tips that you can give someone just to instantly lower that stress, to be able to take that breath and take that next step?
Well, it's kind of interesting the way that you asked the question, because I would say anytime you're feeling in the moment, like a lot of stress mounting, you do have to just be mindful of what you're experiencing, right? So I always tell people, just notice what's going on internally for you. And so much of the time, as I said, we're focused externally. So I work with a lot of super high achievers, and what they know how to do really well is put their head down and just grind, right? But it's really hard for them to tune in a lot of the time and to notice what that experience is like. Like, when am I tired? When do I need to take a break? What is happening when I'm interchanging with this person, whether it's a customer or a colleague or your manager, whoever it is?
I would like to interrupt this podcast and invite you to a money mastery workshop I have coming up real soon. If you're honest, and we're honest about money, money affects all of us every single day. Most of us have a lot of stress because of money. We cannot leave our houses or even be in our houses without doing or thinking about something connected to money. However, have you ever thought about your relationship with money? Is your current financial life where you want it to be? Does your financial life affect other areas of your life and causing more stress? Likely the answer is yes. And regardless of your income or your financial situation, you likely might also be shackled by money and even avoid having money conversations. The Money Mastery Workshop will teach you how to approach the mindset of money, how to reprogram your thoughts, your feelings, and your beliefs around money and where they come from, so you can eliminate fear, doubt, and worry. The idea is to understand that making money is easy and having an abundant life is easy when you know the thinking and the mindset behind money. So head over to heatherjkreider.com/money-workshop to sign up for the next workshop, which is coming up April 21st. Permanently free yourself from financial insecurity and start attracting the money, abundance, freedom, and lifestyle you desire and deserve. April 21st is the next workshop. Head over to heatherjkreider.com. There is a top banner to sign up, or heatherjkreider.com/money-workshop. Okay, I'm going to resume back to the scheduled podcast.
So I think like the invitation here is to start to develop that relationship with yourself. And often what I'll give as an analogy to that is, if you think about your cell phone, right? We all carry this in our pockets, and we're very familiar with how these things work. And one of the things we look at all the time is what level is my battery at? And so if you know that your battery is at 10% or 20%, and we're each going to have our own area where we decide that's where I need to start plugging my phone in, then that's what we do. But like if it was 80%, you probably wouldn't plug it in. And I invite people to start to question, where is my battery at? And if you can use that same analogy of like, I'm at 0 to 100, 0 is like, I'm just wiped, I'm burned out. Like it's really like nothing left to give. We want to avoid getting there as much as possible. So where are you and what does that mean about you and what you need to do and when you need to do it, right? So that's a really good way to kind of assess as you're going through your day. And then once you figure that out and you say, okay, maybe my cutoff is 20% or 30%, then what do you do to recover? And in the book, I actually go through how to maintain the energy that you have, how to recover the energy that you've lost. And everything is kind of set up in these different systems. So it's an opportunity for you to kind of go through these checklists and figure out what you can add to your repertoire. But ultimately, I think it's good for you to sit down and make some sort of a plan. Like when I experience X, then I do Y. It's a really good contingency plan for everybody to have. So it could look like when I get to 30%, then I take 3 deep breaths, or then I go for a walk, or then I meditate for 10 minutes. So figure out what that looks like for you. And I also recommend having like multiple things, like having a menu of options that you can go to so that if meditation works on Monday, but doesn't work on Tuesday for you for some reason, because every day is a little different, then you have a plan B. I can go for a walk, or I can take 5 minutes to breathe, or I can call a friend. So there's like all these different options for you. So that's a great exercise to do ahead of time. And then you kind of have a go-to in the moment when you need it.
That's huge. I love that analogy to when just that physical reminder. You talked earlier about the imagery. Every time you pick up your phone, that can be that check-in with yourself. My phone is at 80%. What am I? That's a great imagery and connection because we pick up our phones, 100, 200, 300 times a day?
Way too many times.
Way too many times. Absolutely. But we care more about the status of our phone than we do ourselves.
That's right.
So that self-awareness is crucial. And like you said, super high achievers, especially super high achievers that are parents, especially super high achievers that are working mothers, our self-awareness is last on the list because we want to get all these other things and people taken care of first. That's when we really lead to more burnout and stress, overwhelm, overload. And that's when it's too hard. It's way too difficult to come back down from that.
Yeah, I have one client that's a working mom, and she talks about how it's really hard for her to spend time on self-care. And for her, it's super interesting because everybody has their reasons, right? But for her, the main reason is because she's very social. So if she doesn't have somebody to do the activity with, she's not going to do it. It's just like kind of pulling teeth for her. Whereas for other people, they don't really need another person, but they need the accountability. Mm-hmm. For everybody, it's a little bit different. So that's part of what we're trying to do in the coaching is figure out like, what do you need and how can we get that for you? So really just first and foremost, identifying what is the obstacle and then what is the plan to overcoming that.
I think that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit, why would I mean, again, I'm asking a very obvious question, what I think is an obvious question, but your book, The Solution, the 7E solution to burnout, again, transforming high achievers from exhausted to extraordinary. If I'm exhausted, it's going to be difficult for me to pick up a book and read it. But tell me why I need to. Tell me why I should.
Yeah, I think what happens is a lot of times people want to check like if they hear this podcast and they're like, it sounds like she knows what she's talking about, and I could probably benefit from working with her, but I want to check her out first. I want to see that she knows what she's really talking about, and like, what are these 7 solutions, right? They sometimes will pick up a book just to kind of get a good sense of what am I talking about there, and get a feel for the coaching that I do in the book. And then they'll call me, or they'll schedule a time, and they'll say, I read your book and I've listened to your podcast, or I've heard you on somebody else's podcast, and I would like to talk about whether this is a good fit for me. So I think like sometimes it comes from that place. And I think other times it's, like I think that I can do it myself, even though I'm experiencing this burnout. So I'll pick up the book because it's just like a no-brainer, right? I don't have to invest a lot of anything. It's just like, go to Amazon, buy it. But then when I start to read it, and it's like, I mean, not to deter anybody, but it's like 400 pages, right? Then people sometimes will be like, I can get through the first bit. And now it's like, all right, let me just call her, because it's so much easier for me to work with somebody than for me to have to do this on my own. So, it's not to say like, don't get the book, especially if you're the kind of person who likes to read up on things and maybe wants to try it on your own. But I think everybody just has to know where they're at and what they need in that moment.
Well, I love that you did pour so much into the book. I mean, it really is a plethora of information for people to be able to find resources in there. And I used to be the type of person where if I had a book, I felt like a failure if I didn't, from start to finish, read it. And what I've learned in my own self-awareness is you get what you need when you need it, and really just use your intuition. And your book in particular, there's many resources within it. Just really use your intuition of what draws you and what you need. Have it as a resource. If there's nothing else you do, use it as a resource to help guide you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've incorporated a whole bunch of exercises in there, both in the book and online. So I'm really trying to tap into different learning styles and help kind of meet people where they're at.
Yeah. No, that's huge. We will absolutely include the link to the book. You also have your burnout checklist, which is a little bit similar to what you were talking about earlier on, just have some awareness of where you're at. So, and additional resources. So we will include those links in all the show notes, and then clearly all the links of how to connect with you on social media and to your site in particular. Do you have any other last takeaways that you want to leave our audience with today?
I would say this, that you started off by saying like sometimes people get into these situations where they're experiencing that struggle, where they're feeling burned out, and they tend to complain. And I would say, if that's you, just know that that's normal, because this work can be really hard when people are trying to show up for work and show up for their families, and then something is not going right. They're trying to figure out how to make it go more smoothly. And just feeling kind of you're stuck in it makes it really challenging. So sometimes our go-to will be to just complain about things. And that's kind of, again, how our brain is structured, is to be kind of lazy. And when people call themselves lazy, I say, it's not really like something that makes you unique, because that's just how we're all wired. It's just learning to say, I want to take control of my brain and override that program that is just meant to keep me alive. I want to thrive. And in order for me to do that, I really have to put in the work to, create these new neural pathways that allow me to think differently and to have a completely different experience on this planet. So, the reason I come on and I share these messages, Heather, is because I want people to self-identify as like, this is something that I struggle with, and this is something that I want to try out for myself, if it can lead me to having that more fulfilled life. And so that's my hope, is that by sharing this, people will have more of an optimistic point of view about what's possible.
I think that's very well said. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for all the work. I mean, clearly it parallels everything that I want to share as well. So I absolutely love and admire that. But thank you for your time and being here today and just keep spreading the beautiful messages.
Likewise. Thank you for having me, Heather.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Go Reflect Yourself. Please rate and review this episode. And if something moved you, please feel free to share. For more inspired action or to stay in touch, head on over to goreflectyourself.com or heatherjkreider.com. You can also take the growth mindset quiz and learn where your current growth mindset lies. Stay in touch on all social media at Heather J. Kreider. Until next time, this is your host, Heather Kreider, and I am challenging you to go reflect yourself so you can discover and become who you are meant to be.